Hey guys, this is Bella. Before we start this week's episode, I just wanted to let you know that this week's episode is going to be the first in a series of 3, and we will be continuing this conversation in next week's episode and the following week. And we hope that you guys enjoy what we have prepared for you guys. Thank you.
Hello, welcome to It Ain't New, the show that represents the history of ethnic minority groups in the USA and where knowledge becomes power. If you don't know, now you know. We're Nyke,
Bella,
Estar,
your very real hosts.
So it's our third episode, and we wanted to talk about why the three of us even wanted to start a podcast. And I think it boils down to we see the world right now, and it's a messed up place. There are so many things that are just not right in this world, but the three of us are not the kind of people who want to just leave it that way, right? And I think the three of us, the reason why we get together and we talk about so many things is because we're like, we can make a change in this world. And so today we're going to be talking about protesting, right? So we're going to ask each other, what do you see as protesting?
I mean, even every time I think about this, I always go back to thinking of art as resistance. Like, crazy enough, I mean, it's the US. We also live in California. We talk about all this like freedom here.
Right.
Art seems to be one of the only places that especially minorities, especially non-white people in the US, had a place of freedom where you could not only express what was necessarily personal to you, but like what mattered to you, what maybe affected whole groups of people. And you could just put that out there, and there was no real boundary to try and like curb that, unless you were, like working with a foundation or something. And they say, you have to do this or, check off this box. But for the most part, you're working by yourself or, again, with a group of people, but you all have similar mindsets. So there's no real like boundaries in the sense of what you can say and what you can do. And I always thought of like how art literally was a part of culture, like all of these different cultures that we're in and we're thinking about. And again, how that was used to kind of bring attention to what was happening on a different scale. Sometimes silent, but also not necessarily silent, kind of very loud, especially when it gets to certain people. Like, for instance, when even though I'm not necessarily a fan of hers, when Beyonce did Lemonade. And did anyone see the kind of like SNL skit of when Beyonce, like what it said? I think it was like called like when Beyonce went black, and how it was like the white people essentially like realized that Beyonce was black, because in Lemonade, she's talking about literally all the crap that happened in Hurricane Katrina, all the stuff that happened even in Texas, because she's from Texas, but her family's from her mom's family is from Louisiana. So it's like, she's talking about all this stuff, and literally it was like everybody reacted like, oh shoot, like, she is black? Like what? But it's like she just made art that mattered to her at the time. Not necessarily like she was necessarily trying to say like, oh, or going against the president or like, something like that. She was just making art.
So suddenly there was like this extra dimension to her art that people were like, wait, is she trying to say something? Is that what you're saying?
Exactly. And I feel like that's always been present, particularly in non-white cultures, I'll say non-white cultures, because I'm even thinking of Irish. I'm even thinking of Italian. I'm even thinking of Greek, especially in America. There's always been this presence of some art form that has taken, like, it's literally representing our culture to the world almost. And so, like, for example, Phyllis Wheatley. A lot of people don't know about her when they're, like, being taught about slavery in the U.S., but she was particularly one of the first Black female writers. She was a poet, but crazy enough, like this was also at a time when Black people, like it was actually illegal for Black people to read and write.
In America.
In America. In France, it was a whole different story, which was, kind of crazy. That's why there were a lot of Black people in France too. So her masters teach her to like read and write. Of course, they're using it as like, oh, look, my slave is smart. But she's literally writing these poems and it's like, oh no, I might be smart, but this is some crap. Like you got me in this mess. And also it leads to more people also sneakily learning to read and write because it's like they said pretty much, you're saying, oh, Black people are dumb, but it's like you're not giving them education. It's not that they're dumb. It's just you're not giving them education from their perspective.
Right.
So, of course, that now gets this like sneakily thing and people are learning to read and write. And then it goes back into even oral storytelling. A lot of people use this as entertainment, but a lot of people also use this to give signals and signs of, hey, we're going to be here at 10 p.m. next to this big tree, or we're going to be next to this river. Like, swing low. There's a part that says, I looked over Jordan and what did I see? Coming forth to carry me home. That's literally a signal saying we're going to be next to the river. And this is where we're going to carry you. So, of course, saying stuff like that, it's like it goes under the radar of everyone else. But for the people who are sharing this art and this language and this culture, it's like, oh, okay, that's how we're going to leave. Are we going to leave by horse? Okay, we're gonna hear those chariots coming in.
It's like code in
exactly.
art.
It's basically coding in art, of course. Then you get into things like the Harlem Renaissance. Of course, everybody thinks, Langston Hughes and what happens to a dream deferred and all of this. And it's like, well, these artists made art that was very present to them in their world. They were talking also about what was happening to Black people in the South. Some of these people were educated too. So they're talking about like Zora Neale Hurston. She writes literally a story about a Black woman who just wants to live life as a Black woman. But no, you have to say she has to be attached to a man. And then when she has to be attached to a man, she can't date someone who's younger than her. She can't like do this. She's not supposed to own money. She's not supposed to have land, like all of this stuff. But of course, it gets in a book. And of course, Black women were like, yeah, we live this life. Like, what? Of course. But she's also writing letters to Black newspapers because, again, she's educated. She's an educator. So she's writing to these Black newspapers against America's imperialistic nature towards Asia. And of course, back then, no one's knowing that, we've got these Pan-African, Pan-Asian conferences and stuff happening. We're getting all of these countries their freedom because we're like, yo, let's link up. Let's talk about what's happening to our world right now.
Yeah. Okay, wait. Whoa, slow down. I think you just dropped a lot of knowledge that might be new to a lot of people. So I just want to give people a little space to process that.
Sorry.
But for sure, I think art is multi-dimensional.
Right.
There's the part that you see, and then there's so many layers to that you don't see.
Right.
And because every person is unique and individual, you can see different things in the same piece of art that the next person.
Exactly.
It's art being filtered through each individual viewer or listener's own background and understanding of the world.
Exactly.
And it's the context that they already bring to it.
Very much so. Very much so.
But I definitely want to explore this idea of like art that changes the world. And so, letters to the editor who thought that could be a thing that changes the world.
Right.
And yet Zora Neale Hurston was doing it.
Exactly. And that was also getting a lot of people, a lot of Japanese Americans were like, yo, thank you for seeing us.
Yeah. So I'm going to just drop a little fun fact there. The fact that for many Asian American families, like we were not allowed citizenship until after World War II. So
right.
They were not seen as American citizens legally at that time.
They mentioned it, but they never really like accepted it. It was like, okay, you were born here, so what? Like, but we also see this a lot in dance and media too. So like, for example, there's a dance company called Black Grace out of New Zealand. They're a Maori dance troupe. Of course, on the surface, it's just like, oh, y'all are doing some cool stuff with, traditional Maori dances and the haka and like all this stuff. Like it looks really cool, but it's like, no, I'm actually telling you, like in New Zealand, y'all made some laws that are directly affecting us indigenous folk. and we've
Negatively.
been here. Yeah, negatively. And we've been here. How in the world are you going to do that? And he now tours literally all over the world telling the same story because that's what was happening. And it basically gets all eyes on New Zealand. Why are you treating your people like this? Then we go into now Hollywood. Hollywood has now become problematic, but Hollywood was not always like that. Hollywood was supposed to be, again, a place where y'all could come and make art. But then we get, oh, we want to make art that looks a certain way because that's what we kind of like sold to the white people who did not let us become a part of mainstream. This is also why when you think of mainstream, most of the time people are thinking of white Americans as mainstream. So again, this is why rock is not seen as a black musical art form, even though it started with black people and came out of blues. But and then even now, like Disney's just trying to go back a little bit to that. Maybe, I'm saying maybe, because I think all of these shows basically started because there was an allowance for BTS to break in and K-pop to come here. But again, it's still in a very particular context.
Well, what kind of shows are you talking about?
So I'm thinking like what just came out, Chongkin Dunk. Actually, it's Chongkin Dunk, but they're saying Chang because, you know, that it's American accent.
It's American Chinese.
Yeah, I was like, is he supposed to be? I think he's supposed to be Chinese too. So I don't know. And then of course we also get American-born Chinese. I want to know also too, how many freaking Asian cultures do we have in America? And it's only, and then even within just like Chinese history, why is it only like particularly like, yeah, like what, like, okay, like.
It's very, very specific and it's very narrow.
Yes. And it's also, it's all the same freaking actors too. So I'm like, okay, now that's a problem. Yeah. Like, what are you doing? But it's like, it's also showing why we now need categories like the black love stories, or this is like your female leads, because you didn't allow it to be what it was supposed to be. We know it's going to be a female lead, but is that all it is? No. So just let it be what it is. Regardless of categories. I mean, we're looking for stuff now, but it's because you're not just like presenting it. Like, this is what we have on here. This is American.
And I can see how, like, initially, right, it's like this idea of, oh, well, it'd be great if we didn't need to like separate these categories. Like, yeah, I would love to get there, but we're not going to be there until like people are willing to accept that these stories exist and they're willing to like put up with seeing more of it.
And also when we switch from being very this idea of multiculturalism, I know y'all can't see that, but I'm literally putting it in air quotes. But yeah, turn from multiculturalism into polyculturalism and realize that culture is not your DNA. Culture is what you can be raised into and what you might be born into, but it's not your actual DNA. Thank you all for listening to It Ain't New, where if you don't know, now you know. We're Nyke,
Bella,
Estar.
Please show us some love on Spotify by leaving us a rating or a review, and join our Patreon so we can grow and continue to give you all wonderful content.